Do the trials and tribulations, the circumstances of life, the wind and the wave, do the things that buffet us, that attack us, that knock us over, is this what directs our life? Or does God direct our life? Even the wind and the wave obeys him. Let the wind blow.
Even the thunder and the wind obey at the command of my Father. Father, I set my feet upon your mighty name. So let the rain fall harder, harder. So take my everything, my flesh and blood. I lay me down on the altar.
Hi, my name is Philip Fanstone, and this is the philipfiles. And this spot is a lot less windy than the last spot I was in. Hi, this is Philip Fanstone, this is philipfiles, and I'm here at Oxley Nature Park. Why did they cut to that? Seriously. So I'm in Oxley Park in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And last month has been windy. And the last couple months have been very windy. And here the wind is blowing through my hair. The sky is clear. I haven't got a care. It feels so good and free. Just like God is sitting next to me. Oh, over here. I'm sorry. Okay, so I do have a care. I do have a lot of cares. A lot of stuff has been going on. And when it's windy, when the circumstances of life are assailing us, attacking us, blowing us, do we fall down or do we resist? And this interesting thing, nature gives us a lot of cool little illustrations. Hurricanes, what kind of trees are found where there are typically strong storms? Usually palm trees. And palm trees, well, that's actually the answer to the question. So let me go backwards. Oak trees, when there's a storm and an oak tree hits a storm, the oak tree resists. And eventually, if the storm is strong enough, the oak tree shatters, cracks, falls down. On the other hand, you can have other trees that, like here behind me, you have other trees that don't resist, or they fall down too easily. So you have the trees that fall down too easily, like over here. You got a lot of these trees right here falling down too easily. Driftwood, if you will. Here we are. And then you have oak trees that resist and they fall down too eventually. They stand longer, of course. Oak trees do. But then you have the palm trees, and they will bend, but they won't break, and then they'll come right back up. That's kind of interesting. I don't know if there's a lot more to that. I don't know how deep that really is, but I think the storms are going to hit us, and we either don't bend it or we just give in. The first storm comes, we fall down. That's kind of wimpy. Or we resist and and then when it does get too much, we crack and we shatter. I think the answer is in the middle there, the palm trees, where we bend with the wind, but we don't let it knock us down. We know we come back to where we were. We kind of flex, we flex it a little bit. So the last couple months have been rough, and when times are rough, and we, for instance, last couple months I've been called crazy, and not just once, by a few people, and so I think of myself as a sane person. So as a sane person would do if they're called crazy, a sane person would ask, am I crazy? And research that and investigate that. Because none of us wants to be crazy. But the truth is, as I mentioned previously in the Newsboys song RSL 1984, I don't know if they coughed in that song, but they did say, you don't know you're deceived until you're not. That just hit me when I heard that. Wow, I was like, dude, no one thinks they're deceived. So if you're deceived and somebody says, hey, you're deceived or you're crazy, I think the natural response should be to, kind of test that out, make sure you're not crazy. I think the fruit of the Spirit, not the fruit of the Spirit, the armor of God, and one of them is the breastplate of righteousness. breastplate of righteousness. Righteousness is right standing with God. So I think we do need to be in right standing with God, and that's where, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling, and test yourself and prove, and there does need to be some introspection, right? And there does need to be questioning. Make sure your motives are right. Make sure you're listening to God or hearing God correctly. So these are real things. There is that verse, obviously, in Ephesians where it says, having done all this, to stand. So once you put on the breastplate of righteousness, you're in right standing with God, your feet shod with the preparation of gospel, the belt of truth, helmet of salvation, all these things. Once you've done all that, you've checked all that off. Not like it's a checklist, but you kind of make sure you're in the right spot. I think there's another verse that says, be careful where you stand lest you fall. All right, so you've done all that. Then, having done all that, you stand. There comes a point where you can't bend anymore. You can't fall over like driftwood. You've got to remain firm and stand. So when does that point? Now that's the interesting question. That's a $64,000 question, as it were. So people are calling me crazy, and one of the reasons is because I feel like I hear from God. I do. I've written down recently. God's had me in the last 6-7 months write down the things that He's told me over the years, and He doesn't. I don't hear Him every day, but I do. I do hear from Him, and it's not an audible voice. And I'll say I feel like God said this. And I'm open to people saying, well, didn't God, can we talk about that? But most people get intimidated and they don't even want to talk about it, because most people don't hear from God. So if you say you hear from God, you must be crazy. Well, that's kind of crazy. So this happened a couple weeks ago. I was, somebody was calling me crazy, and they'd say, well, you say you hear from God, and well, yeah, I'm a Christian. I believe the Bible, and people in the Bible heard from God. So why can't we hear from God? It's just a logical extension there. And then, so this is how God kind of talks to me at times. So that day I was like, am I crazy? Am I a little cuckoo? And so that day I, as I often do, I get my YouVersion Holy Bible and YouVersion out. And it was interesting because that day on February 18th, I don't know if you can see that there, but February 18th, anyway, just trust me. The verse was 2 Corinthians 5:14-15. What I often do is I'll click on the verse of the day and just read the whole chapter, the whole context of it. And when you do that, it was 14 and 15 were the ones that they had. The very previous verse was, and so this is the day. This is how God talks to me. One of the ways, okay? It is already confirmed. So going back to, do the circumstances direct our life, or does God direct our life? Now, God will sometimes use circumstances, but is God the directing your life, or is the circumstances? Okay, so God, I want God to direct my life. So on this particular day, I'm praying. I'm like, Lord, am I crazy? Am I hearing from you, or am I way off on this? And so I get the Holy Bible, and I've done this other times. The where you just flip open to a spot and you just read. And man, it's miraculously accurate. It's amazing. Try that sometime. Pray first and say, God, speak to me. Open the Bible, or and see where it lands. So with digital Bibles, you have to, but this was, I just do the verse of the day. I didn't pick the verse of the day. Somebody picked it somewhere, and so I read the chapter. So this is where God, speaking through the circumstances. So God directs through the circumstances in this one. And in verse 13, if we are out of our mind, as some say, it is for God. If we are in our right mind, it is for you. And then it continues, for Christ's love compels us. And wow. So that was like, I'm like, Lord, am I crazy? And then God says, no, you're not crazy. If you're out of your mind, then you're doing, the world is out of its mind. The world, the world, the Bible says, God has chosen the foolish things of the world to confound the wise. And the wisdom of God is foolishness to man, and vice versa. The wisdom of man is foolishness to God. So if we're going to be Christians and really believe what we say, not just, go through the motions, get the fire insurance, but if we're really going to believe the Bible and what God says, we're going to be called crazy or out of our mind. So today I was thinking about this, and I was like, well, how many times, because I was thinking about doing this video and coming out to a park and doing this, so I was like, well, how many times is crazy in the Bible? So I looked up crazy in the Bible, did a little search, and in the King James and NIV, it's not in there. The word crazy is not in the Bible. At least my search didn't reveal anything. Then I looked at the verse and I was like, oh, didn't say crazy, it says out of our mind. So I looked up that. And that was interesting because there is another thing. So God is using all these things to kind of direct me and guide me. There's another verse in Nehemiah, right? And in Nehemiah, if I can get to it. Ooh, okay, Nehemiah. It says Nehemiah, as you know, is in Persia serving the king, and he's sad. He wants to go back to Jerusalem and rebuild the wall because he hears the wall in Jerusalem has been torn down. It's not there anymore, and so the king sends him back and provisions him, gives him a royal decree, a commission, gives him resources to rebuild the wall in Jerusalem. Awesome, praise God, right? Well, that's the end of the story. No, it's not. When you read the story of Nehemiah, he goes back to Jerusalem, he starts rebuilding the wall, and he gets attacked. So when God provides for us and commissions us and sends us to do his will, we can expect circumstances to come and try to slap us upside the noggin. Okay, we can expect there to be resistance. And that's why Jesus says those who desire to live godly lives in Christ Jesus will suffer persecution. I sometimes think, when you're not suffering persecution, you got to be, am I rowing a boat on a kiddie pond? Am I not, maybe I'm not where I'm supposed to be. Maybe I need to get out into the ocean, get out and into the thick of it. So when you have persecution, it is natural to question and say, okay, am I right? Make sure you're not suffering persecution because you're a jerk. Make sure you're suffering persecution for the right reasons. Some people are so stubborn, like that oak tree. They're so stubborn that they're doing it to themselves. They're suffering persecution not because they're serving God, but because they're being stubborn. Okay, so you've got to check yourself, make sure you're right standing with God, make sure you're in the right spot. So I read this verse in Nehemiah. So today, Nehemiah, basically Sanballat and Tobiah and some other these people that are resisting the rebuilding of the wall, they go to Nehemiah and they say, you know what, Nehemiah, we're going to tattle on you. We're going to send a letter to the king, and we're going to tell him that what you're doing is wrong. You're trying to rebel. You're trying to rebuild the wall so you can rebel against Persia, which is, of course, not true. And this is an interesting thing. When people accuse us, first of all, Satan's name is the accuser, the accuser, and I put this in the previous thing. Well, he accuses of stuff he's guilty of. I mean, think about that. Satan has done so many terrible things throughout history. And yet he's going to accuse you when you get mad or you cuss or you do something you're not supposed to. So he's done all of it and worse, but he's going to turn and accuse you. And this is the interesting thing about Sanballat and Tobiah and these others, is they're accusing Nehemiah of stuff that's in their heart. And I've seen that recently in the circumstances, not to get into any details in my life, but with the storm that's been going on in my life, I'm being accused of a lot of stuff. And some of it is, as I said last time, there's some basis in reality there, so I'm not going to completely dismiss it. But a lot of it is not me at all. I'm a very honest person. I've been called a liar more times than I can tell you. And just watch my videos. I'm very honest, okay? But what's happening is people are accusing me of the things that are in them. So that's kind of interesting. So Sanballat, so they're accusing him, and he says, Nehemiah responds and says, well, if I'm out of my mind, as you say, well, I'm not, number one. That's you, that's not me. And then he says, and then he turns to God and he says, Lord, strengthen my hand. So there comes a time when we get attacked and we've checked, we make sure we're in right stand with God, we make sure we're doing the right motives, we kind of test ourselves. Be careful where you stand lest you fall. And then at that point, we've got to go all in. Got to double down, go all in, go for it. He says in there, strengthen my hand. And there's an interesting thing about the people accusing us of the motives that are in their heart, because you see this in Scripture. You see this with David as he's about to go kill Goliath. His brother questions his motives. His brother, Eliab, says, you're here just trying to show off. Why is Eliab saying that? And this happens a few times in the life of David. People are accusing him, Shemaiah, when he's fleeing from Absalom. Shemaiah accuses him of killing the house of Saul. David didn't kill the house of Saul. All right? David actually tried to, he refused to touch Saul. Refused to hurt him when he could have. So the people a lot of times will accuse you of stuff that's in their heart. Now, it is wise to consider things and to check it, make sure you're in right standing, make sure you're where God wants you to be. And then when you do, move forward. Now, it is right, in the story of Gideon, to ask for confirmation, ask, Lord, confirm this. We're in. So that's what God did for me a couple weeks ago with that verse. He's like, out of your mind. Well, people are going to call you out of your mind. That's okay. And then today with Nehemiah, so I had a question today, and I was like, oh, well, Nehemiah, he was like, strengthen my hand, Lord. Sometimes you got to go for it. When you know, there's a time for question, there's a time for counsel. And going back to David and Goliath, there's a time to test the armor, time to get provision. But once you're going after Goliath, you got to go for broke. There comes a time when, having done all, you've got to stand and you got to fight. Now, as I said in the last one, fight the fight of faith. Don't fight the fight of the flesh, okay? And we got to know the difference there. And that's where, if it's pride, if it's because your own hurts and so forth, you got to deal with those things. And I've had to deal with those things. But there comes a time, and I've been doing it today, I've been fighting in prayer. I'm like, you know what? I have checked myself. I've been utterly honest, and now it's like, okay, it's time to fight. Again, it's a spiritual fight. You know, pray in the Spirit to take authority and to do what God's told you to do. So anyway, so do the wind and the waves, do they determine what we do? And I think if they do, you're going to be washed, and like James says, you're going to be kicked here and there. You're going to be all over the place. You know, maybe another better metaphor would be a boat on a lake or a boat on the ocean. You know, at some point, you put your anchor down, and you still kind of, you know, move a little bit back and forth as the wind and come and go, because the anchor is not going to keep fixed in one spot, but you're anchored, as opposed to a boat that has no anchor. It gets rammed up against the shore, or taken out to sea, or whatever. So we do have to have an anchor, but we have to be a little flexible. This is going back to the palm tree metaphor as well. We got to bend a little bit and test when there's an attack come against us. We'll make sure you're doing it for the right reason. Make sure your motives are right. Make sure that you're hearing from God, and then go for it. Now, so this week, just two other confirmations. Again, God uses circumstances. That's where I was going with this. God will use circumstances, but we got to look to God first, and then He can reveal Himself through the circumstances, through the wind and the wave. They obey Him. Okay, and as we look to God first, if you bid me come, I'll come, and then look to Him. Now, don't get distracted by the wind and the wave like Peter did. Of course, he is one of the two people in history that's walked on water that we know about. And so, a lot of people get on him for that, but he took action. But then he got distracted by the wind and the wave. He started to sink. He didn't just sink. That's interesting. He started to sink. So I'd love to have video of that. But anyway, so Jesus, if He tells you to come and you've tested, then you got to focus on Him and go for it. Okay, and that's where it's hard. It's hard for me because I'm kind of one of these. Somebody told me recently, a friend of mine told me recently that I acquiesce too much, and I agreed with her. Yeah. So sometimes for me, I'm not stubborn enough at times. It's kind of ironic because people think I'm very stubborn, but I want to be a diplomat. I want to be peacemaker, but there is a time where you're just going to have to. You've done all, stand, and you can't keep flittering about like a butterfly. You gotta stand. So okay, so this week, kind of a little confirmation, and then I'll end this video. This week I was two things, and I'm not going to get into a lot of details, but two things happened. One, my mom had a dream that my house burned down about 2 weeks ago, around the same time, and she shared it with me, and she just warned me about it, and I took it seriously. And so with my mom, we went around, prayed over our house, anointed the different rooms, and anointed the house. And then before I left this past week for Tulsa, where I work, I prayed over the house and anointed, went around the outside of the house and prayed over and anointed it. And so I took authority. I took it seriously. Okay. Well, here, lo and behold, on Thursday, we were having some problems with our fuses in our house. And on Thursday, my wife called an electrician. They came out, and the electrician said, it's not the fuses, it's something else. And butterfly, shoe fly. That's a nice little butterfly. But anyway, my wife called an electrician, and then the electrician said, it's not your house, it's the line coming into your house. So they called our power delivery service, Encore, and they came out, and the guy from Encore said basically he was surprised our house didn't burn because fire ants had dug into one of those transformer boxes in the front yard, and it had eaten a lot of the lines. And eaten in such a degree that a fire could have been, that's why the fuses were popping, was to prevent a fire. And this has been going on for a couple weeks. So my mom gets this warning, I listen to it, and God, and through that circumstance, I pray over the house, and my wife calls the electrician, and we take action there as well. And God prevented something. So that's like, wow, I'm not crazy. I am hearing from you. I'm listening, I'm responding, and because I responded, And my wife also got some advice, and she called the electrician. God's protected our house. All right? God was kind of showing me. See, He's arranging things. And if we trust Him and take a step out in faith, we walk by faith, not by sight, then God provides and God opens doors and God does these things. We have to we have to be moving, as I've said in the previous one. So all that to say, the wind and the wave should not direct us. Circumstances should not direct your life. And if they are, you're going to get crushed. You're going to be like this driftwood over here that's all on the shoreline, crushed and dead and broken from its roots. You got to be like the trees planted by the rivers of water, and like way over there. You got to dig your roots in there and not be easily knocked over. And yet at the same time, don't be so stubborn that you get shattered either. Be more like a palm tree, right? Or a boat that's anchored. Anyway, thanks for listening today. Let me know what you think. If I'm completely off, let me know, because again, faithful are the wounds of a friend, even if it's a YouTube friend. You're a good person, I'm sure. So if you have something to say that you're like, you know what, you may be wrong here, hey, I'll listen. You've listened to my things, so I'll read. Actually, I'll read it out loud, and then I can read it and listen to me reading what you wrote. But I will hearken to what you say or type. Anyway, I appreciate it. Have a great day. God bless. Shalom. Let the wind blow. Other words that go right here. Let the wind blow. On Christ the solid rock I stand. Let the wind blow.